So we are, oh, and yeah, so our topic tonight is water, which is very timely because we have a lot of it at the moment. Uh-oh. And for some reason, I can't advance. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think it's just delayed. Okay, and as Carrie mentioned, this is all based on the Project Drawdown framework. So these series of engagements that we are doing throughout this year is based on this framework. If you're not familiar with this framework, which many of you probably are, I do encourage you to get on their website and check it out. So this is a framework that's becoming pretty internationally known. It is being used by many different levels of government. It's being used by universities. It's being used by all kinds of different organizations and corporations and all kinds of entities. And what this is it's a framework of climate change solutions. And these are all solutions that have been vetted, right? They've done economic study, they've done, they've vetted these, and these are all solutions that you can take out of this box and start using them today. And so all these different entities are starting to use this framework to plan and to see where they fit and how they can be active as part of a climate change solution. And drawdown just meaning, to give this a little bit of context here, what they mean by drawdown is that point in the future, hopefully the near future, when levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere stop climbing and start to sort of level out and then start to actually decline, so that we can hopefully, avoid some of the more catastrophic climate change ramifications that we are currently headed for. So a very cool framework, all kinds of solutions in here. Get on their website, check them out. But tonight we're focusing on water and some solutions around water. And so really this is going to be, we're going to be talking tonight about solutions, but also about adaptations really at the end of the day. With sort of this changing hydrology in our region of the world. And right now, sort of the trends that we're headed towards with our climate is really taking us towards this sort of feast and famine scenario when it comes to water, right? So all of these things come from the Climate Impacts Group, the UW Climate Impacts Group. So if you're interested in learning more, you can Google that, and they've got all kinds of great information on climate change trends in our specific region of the world. And so what some of these trends related to water are starting to look like is we're going to still have generally the same amount of precipitation that we have had in the past. So that doesn't seem like it's going to be changing a lot as we go into the coming decades. However, the timing of that precipitation is really probably going to start to change. And I think this year might be a really great example of what we might start to see a little more regularly as we move into the coming decades. So really looking at the precipitation, all that yearly precipitation that we would get, starting to come in the fall and winter months. So all of it just being packed into that half of the year. And then in sort of the spring and the summer months, starting to see these longer, drier periods where we just don't have any rainfall and we get really dry. So that's kind of the trend we're moving towards, this feast and famine. The precipitation is also going to change in form, so that, that precipitation that we do get in the winter months, as we start to move into these warmer winters, we're going to be having less of this come as snowfall, and we're probably going to see more of these bigger rain events. So a lot of that water not being held in those really super big snowpacks that we're used to, right? And we rely on those snowpacks in this part of Washington State to sort of get us through these summer months. Those snowpacks kind of feed our river and our stream systems throughout the summer. So we're looking at those not being as robust as they've been in the past, and then potentially the ones that we, you know, the snowpack we do get potentially melting off much earlier in the springtime. So really looking at these drier summers with a lot less water. So we're going to kind of talk about some of the solutions, some of the adaptations to this, potential adaptations that we might have available on our own landscapes in our own region here. And I'm just going to briefly introduce these, and then we can all start to talk about our own experiences and ask questions about these and share information around this. So, you know, we kind of broke this up into two camps, this sort of too much water and then too little water. So in addressing too much water, a lot of the landowners that we work with as a conservation district are farmers. And we have noticed that a lot of farmers are experiencing these newly saturated fields, where these fields are becoming wetter, longer, they're getting really saturated, they're not drying out like they used to. There are problems with drainage systems and things like that. So we have farmlands that have too much water on some of their fields now. They might not be able to get out on their fields at the appropriate times to plant certain crops. They might see reduction yields. And so one of the adaptations or one of the solutions to this too much water on some of our farmlands are these multi-story cropping systems, where we're looking at plantings, these diverse plantings of perennial crops that can tolerate these wet and saturated soils and still offer production in these landscapes. So that's one for too much water. Again, on a lot of our landscapes, we've got a lot of streams and rivers that flow through our lands. And whether you're a homeowner, whether, you know, it might be a park, whether, you know, if you're a farmer, there may be a nearby stream or river. There may be a river flowing through your landscape. Another solution to too much water or flooding are these water breaks. And these are essentially linear forested plantings that we plant along the stream side. And these reduce flooding impacts to the land adjacent to it. In much the same way that a windbreak functions. And we may be more familiar with windbreaks. These are used a lot in the Midwest, where they'll plant dense rows of trees and shrubs to block these prevailing winds that blow through and shelter maybe crops or livestock or homes from the big impacts of those winds. Well, these water breaks work the same way when it comes to floodwaters. It disperses, breaks up that flow. These things can catch debris coming out of streams and rivers and can really protect adjacent landscapes from the effects of floodwaters. We also have some cool flood prediction tools on our website, and this is the link to this tool. It's kind of cool because you can go in there and you can select your greenhouse gas scenario. We have a low scenario that you can select, or we have a high scenario. I would recommend you select the high scenario because that is the reality that we're living with at the moment. And then you can select a time frame. So you can select in 10 years, you can select 25 years, in 100 years. What is flooding predicted to look like where I live, right? If you're a farmer, if you're a landowner, if you're a homeowner, you can use this tool and you can get a sense of what flooding prediction might be like in our area. And it might give you some information and inform some decisions you might make. So it's kind of a cool interesting tool that you can play around with that we have. Too little water. One of the things, especially if you have farmlands, is irrigation efficiency. As we are in summer months, and those are the months that we're growing crops, and we need to conserve water resources as we move into sort of these new hydrologic trends in our region, we're going to really need to be looking at how we're irrigating our landscapes. And that could be even how you're irrigating your garden beds or your lawn, right? And so there are a lot of new efficient technologies for how we apply water. Drip irrigation, new technologies of sprinklers that direct water more closely to the soil and to crops instead of spraying it up in the air where it can evaporate and be wasted. So this is a great thing to pay attention to when we're thinking about moving into those summer months and growing food or lawn or gardens or whatever it is. Multi-strata agroforestry is another great solution to too little water. So this really is planting food crops in a way that mimics forest ecosystems. It is really beneficial for conserving water. These types of systems can help actually recharge groundwater because these different deep root systems that are associated with trees and shrubs help draw water through the soil profile down deeper into the ground. These systems help retain soil moisture better with different types of shade and canopy cover, and the way that water is deeper in the soil profile. These systems tend to retain moisture much better than an open field of cropland or a lawn or some raised garden beds or things like that. So thinking about planting crops, planting food systems, this can even be done in a backyard garden in sort of this stratified, layered sort of system to help conserve water. Rainwater harvesting. As it stands now, you can collect rainwater from an existing roof structure within our region without a water right. What you cannot do is go out into the middle of a field or to your garden and build a little makeshift roof structure and collect a bunch of water. So if you have a barn, if you have a house, if you have a shed or a chicken coop, any of these structures that are existing and serving a function, you could put cisterns on and you can collect rainwater, because we're going to have that period where we're going to get a ton of water. And then we're going to have a period where we don't have enough. So can we collect that water? Can we store it somehow for that later use? And there are all different scales of this system, whether these are big farm scale systems or whether they're small home system, all types of scales for rainwater collection. And then I do have to talk about Beaver when we talk about water resources. So we have gotten sort of into this place of dehydrating our landscape, right? We have removed these amazing creatures over many, many years from our landscapes for the most part. We have developed and put a bunch of impervious surface on our landscapes. We have cut down a lot of forests. And essentially what we have now is when we have these times where all this water hits us, what happens is a lot of this water just rushes off the landscape as fast as it can right into the Puget Sound. And it's not being held on our landscape for later use. Beaver in our landscapes help store water. They serve a lot of functions around water resources on our landscapes. They slow and they store floodwater. This helps recharge groundwater resources. It can help decrease the severity of flooding downriver and help increase stream flows in summer months. They create these wetland ecosystems that really serve as amazing upland water storage and provide critical habitat for a lot of the species that we enjoy here in our region. And I do want to say that we have a beaver specialist on staff, and this is her name, Elisa Kerr, and her contact information. So if you are curious about beaver, if you have beaver, if you want to know more about them, I would encourage you to contact her and find out about beaver or about how you can live with them if you do have them on your landscape. There's a lot of new techniques and a lot of things that we can do to balance your land use with actually allowing beaver to exist in some spaces as well. So I just had to give Beaver a shout out since we're talking about water resources. And at that, I am going to be quiet now for a while and turn it over to everyone else so we can discuss some of these topics.